Hello, so welcome back. Today we are talking about newborn thermoregulation. So we're going to start off with what is thermoregulation, and hopefully this is a bit of a recap of adult thermoregulation for you. So thermoregulation is the homeostatic process in the body that maintains a steady internal body temperature despite changes in the external conditions. So it doesn't matter what the weather is outside, whether it's boiling hot, freezing cold, the body takes care of it. And maintaining a body temperature within a tight range is really important. Ideal body temperature, that's our internal core temperature, is between 36.5 to 37.5 degrees Celsius. And that allows for the enzymes and the immune responses of the body to maintain a proper functionality. So adult temperature regulation, because if we're going to understand the neonate, we need to understand the adult. So optimal internal body temperature, as I said, is about 37 degrees Celsius. Temperature is regulated by the hypothalamus, and in the preoptic area specifically. And the body has peripheral and central thermoreceptors. Peripheral thermoreceptors are located in the skin and sense surface temperatures, whereas central thermoreceptors are found in the viscera, the spinal cord, the hypothalamus, and they sense the core temperature. Variations in body temperature activate these thermoreceptors, which inform the preoptic area of the hypothalamus. And this area then activates heat regulation mechanisms to increase or decrease body temperature and return us to baseline. So, the fetus. So, what about fetal development? So, how does the fetus develop thermoregulatory capacity? So, the fetal hypothalamus and the thermoregulatory center of the hypothalamus form the ventral diencephalon and are differentiated by approximately 9 to 10 weeks gestation. The central thermoregulatory mechanisms are therefore present at birth, but they're developmentally deficient and they're poorly differentiated, which means that the fetus is not fantastic at regulating, and the baby when it's born is not fantastic at regulating its temperature, particularly those that are small and premature. They're really at severe risk of heat loss and hypothermia. So transitional events. So at birth, fetal temperature is usually 0.5 to 1 degree Celsius higher than the mother's. However, the newborn immediately loses her heat at birth by evaporation, convection, conduction, and radiation, dependent on things like the ambient air pressure, temperature and humidity, and temperature of the surrounding surfaces and room that you're in. And remember, a wet newborn with a high surface area to volume ratio moves from a warm, aqueous environment into a cool, dry delivery room. Heat loss is really rapid. And that is why we want to think about our neutral thermal environment. So a neutral thermal environment is an environment in which the neonate maintains a normal body temperature whilst minimizing energy expenditure and oxygen consumption. And remember, if you're not using your energy to maintain your heat, you can use it for more important things like growing. So a new neonate who experiences thermal stability within this neutral thermal environment demonstrates enhanced growth, decreased respiratory support, decreased oxygen requirements, increased glucose stability, reduced mortality and reduced morbidities associated with hypothermia and hypothermia. And we can see from this diagram the 4 methods of heat loss: radiation, convection, evaporation, and conduction. So newborn thermoregulation. Newborns have only very limited ability to maintain a normal temperature, and they very easily become hypothermic or hyperthermic. Although hypothermia also increases energy needs, hypothermia seems to carry a higher risk of complications. Again, we have this optimal temperature, which is termed a thermal neutral temperature, where these metabolic requirements are minimal. And remember, both a decrease and an increased core temperature increases the metabolic rate of newborns. So some specific considerations for the newborn. So of course, newborns are unable to maintain their body temperature on their own without thermal protection. Newborns are functionally poikilothermic. That is, they change their body temperature according to environmental temperature. Their range compared to an adult of an optimal or a tolerable body temperature is narrow. And a newborn placed in an environment of 23 degrees Celsius at birth suffers the same cold as a naked adult does at 0 degrees Celsius. And think about yourself in a delivery room. If you're a healthcare provider, you're probably hot, you're wandering around, you might be doing lots of things at once. It's generating your own body heat. You might feel quite warm in that 23 degree room, but the baby is going to be feeling really cold. And a newborn placed in a colder environment, core temperature decreases at a rate of 0.2 to 1 degree Celsius per minute, could lead to death from cessation of metabolic activity. So it's important that we keep the room warm for the newborn. There's 2 important concepts when we're considering thermoregulation in the newborn. One is the internal gradient. The internal gradient is the temperature differential between the core of the body and the skin, and it results in the transfer of heat from within the body to its surface. This process relies on an effective and extensive blood flow network in the capillaries and the venous plexi, influenced by tissue insulation provided by subcutaneous fat and the convective movement of heat through the blood. Heat conduction is under the control of the sympathetic nervous system, and that results in changes in skin blood flow by vasoconstriction and vasodilation. And in the neonate, heat loss through this gradient is increased because the thinner layer of subcutaneous fat and a larger surface to volume ratio than in the adult. And remember, premature infants, infants who are growth restricted, are going to have less of that subcutaneous fat and that larger surface to volume ratio. The external gradient, the second concept to think about here, this results in heat loss from the body surface to the environment, and the rate of heat loss is directly proportional to the difference between the temperature of the skin and that of the environment. Heat transfer by the external gradient is increased in the neonate, increased surface area and thermal transfer, and the neonate maintains temperature by the means of the external gradient, that is skin temperature change, whereas the adult uses the internal gradient. Physical activity. So shivering is not regularly involved in a newborn's reaction to cold stress. Instead, different mechanisms of infant behaviour produce heat. For example, an irritable crying baby is going to prompt somebody to hold it. Another key concept to know about when you're thinking about newborn thermoregulation is brown adipose tissue. So when the infant's body temperature decreases in response to sudden cold extrauterine environments, there are signals from the peripheral and central thermoreceptors that go to the hypothalamus through the afferent pathways. There is a resulting norepinephrine release that then triggers non-shivering thermogenesis or lipolysis of brown adipose tissue, which is the main homeothermic heat production mechanism in newborns. Heat production occurs through the uncoupling of ATP synthesis via the oxidation of fatty acids in the mitochondria. Decreasing body temperature triggers a release of thyroid-stimulating hormone, which leads to an increase in thyroxine, and the resulting norepinephrine release causes vasoconstriction, glycolysis, and uncoupling of the mitochondrial oxidation in the brown adipose tissue, further generating heat production. So how do we examine the newborn in terms of thermoregulation? Well, like any assessment, we consider observation, palpation, but we are not going to be auscultating. Think about your equipment. It is appropriate for a newborn to perform an axilla temperature as opposed to a rectal temperature, a tympanic temperature, or an oral temperature. This is the most reliable and least invasive for the newborn. We can observe the infant. We can look at the colour. Does the infant appear pale? Do they appear mottled? Are there signs of vasoconstriction? Do they appear flushed? Are there signs of vasodilation? We can look at their activity. We can palpate. We can feel the core and extremity temperatures with your hand, with your palm. This is not particularly reliable. In settings where we have a thermometer, this is much more reliable. We need to ensure that we measure temperature within 1 hour of birth, again through the axilla, to ensure that post-birth our temperature is now stable. And prevention is key. You should have a delivery room that is at least 25 degrees Celsius. The windows and the door should be shut and the fans turned off to avoid any heat loss. Air conditioning should be adjusted if you have air conditioning. And supplementary heating, such as an overhead heater, should be available and turned on ready in case you need to perform resuscitation. You should dry the infant with a pre-warmed absorbent towel. Whilst being dried, the infant should be on a warm surface. And remember that a baby in a wet towel is a wet baby. So once you've dried the baby, you should remove that wet towel and use another warm towel to wrap the baby. And ideally the head should be covered, preferably with a wool hat to prevent heat loss. And of course, skin to skin is ideal to maintain thermoregulation in the newborn, as well as a host of other benefits in terms of maternal-infant bonding and infant feeding. Babies at risk, so do look out for your babies who have got IUGR or a low birth weight, babies who are premature, babies who have got an infection, and babies who are hypoglycemic. So signs of hypothermia in the newborn. So shallow breathing, apnea and bradycardia, a decreased activity and apparent lethargy, hypotonia with diminished reflexes, pale mottled skin or cool to the touch cold extremities, and a weak stomach, poor feeding, poor gastric emptying or abdominal distension, and hypoglycemia. In terms of managing hypothermia, always complete a full set of observations. Depending on the level of hypothermia, if it's mild, skin to skin, blankets, clothing might be appropriate, or radiant heat. You should close any windows, stop any fans, stop heat loss continuing. Consider a septic screen, and of course escalate it to a paediatric team. Now, in terms of our signs of hypothermia, if it's due to overheating, there may be tachycardia, tachypnea, apnea, could be hypertension, and also warm extremities, flushing and perspiration. Good to see lethargy, hypotonia, poor feeding, and a central temperature that is actually lower than that of the peripheral temperature as the baby attempts to lose heat via the external gradient. If we have hypothermia due to fever, we might see different symptoms. So we might see pale, cool extremities, a core temperature that is greater than the peripheral temperature. In terms of managing hypothermia, we're going to complete a full set of observations. Consider clothing and blankets. Is this baby overheated? Is it overwrapped, overswaddled? Consider, of course, a septic screen and escalate to the paediatric team. So in summary, remember, newborns are uniquely at risk. They have an underdeveloped thermoregulation system. They have a reduced subcutaneous fat capacity, and they have a high surface area to volume ratio. Remember that prevention is key. Stopping the baby getting cold or getting too hot is easier than trying to reverse those changes. There are many practical steps you can take as a healthcare provider to ensure that babies do not get cold. And immediate newborn care practices can hinder thermoregulation. So consider when you are drying a baby, when you are weighing a baby, when you are performing neonatal checks, is this the right time to be doing this? Am I actually stopping this baby and being able to transition to extrauterine life in terms of its thermoregulation? Great, thanks for watching. That was a summary of thermoregulation in the newborn. For more information, there are fantastic resources from the World Health Organization, the British Association of Perinatal Medicine, and many more.